Well, welcome everybody. How you doing? We've got another really fun time ready for you. Welcome back to another YouTube Live from CompTIA, and happy Cybersecurity Awareness Month. This evening, we'll be talking through the skills that you need to succeed in cybersecurity and some resources that can help you. I'm James Stanger. I work for CompTIA, and I'm the Chief Technology Evangelist. And I'm going to be your host throughout the month here as we explore, or the rest of the month, I guess it is, as we explore a variety of skills here, cybersecurity skills, with a panel of experts. And it changes each week in and out. And here we go. I hope you caught us last week. And if not, I suggest you go on back and go check it out. It's pretty cool. So let me start by introducing my co-host, Don Pizzette. Don, how you doing? You're from IT Pro TV, and tell us more about yourself, sir.
Well, I am Don Pizzette, co-founder and edutainer here at IT Pro TV. I'm coming at you from Gainesville, Florida. I've been working in IT for over 20 years and spent a good bit of that time teaching. So I've been teaching CompTIA certifications and a number of other training, vendor training throughout that time. But I've also worked for a number of companies and had a great chance to implement a lot of the technologies we're going to talk about tonight in a production environment and get a chance to see that grow as companies have moved into the cloud and new technologies have emerged. I've had a chance to work with a lot of that, and now I do that as training for IT Pro TV.
Well, fantastic, Don. You know, while Don was saying that he's calling in or coming in here from Gainesville, Florida, everyone, where are you joining in from? I see Brittany from Las Vegas. We got Russell from Dallas. Who else do we have, Don? We've got Brazil, right? Guthrie from Brazil.
Yep. I've seen Gary from Kingston, Jamaica. We've got Brazil, Maryland, right? It's not as exotic, but still far away from me, at least. Mexico, Philippines, people from all over.
Got folks from Spain. And let's see, real quick, I'll go out of order here. Gabby, introduce yourself just real quick to everybody, because we're excited to have you on our one-person panel for the first part of this conference. We're going to have a couple people at the end, right? A guy named Chris Cochran will be joining in. But for right now, Gabby, tell us just a bit about yourself, and then I'll go back in order. How about that?
Well, first, thank you guys for having me. My name is Gabby Ariza, and I'm a cybersecurity specialist. I've been in the field for a few years, and I'm also on Instagram, fab_millennial, where I talk a lot about cybersecurity.
Thanks so much, Gabby. You know, folks, tonight it's our third in the series, and we'll be focusing on cybersecurity skills. And Gabby has a bunch of those. Don has a bunch of those. And so we're going to be hosting one more of these events, folks, live this month. And that'll be next Thursday, covering different cybersecurity topics. The one next week, Security Plus 601 exam. So like this video, subscribe to our channel, join us in spreading the cybersecurity goodness and awareness. So Don, what do you think we can do here in talking more about Gabriella?
Well, you know, I think it's important to highlight what our topic of the day is. You know, this is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and today we're going to be talking about the skills you need to succeed in cybersecurity and some free resources to help. So I want to point out before we get too far deep, sometimes in these roundtables, we start rattling off tools and people try and write them down really quick. So this time we were a little proactive, and in the YouTube description, you can find all the links that each of us provided. I know I provided some, James, you did, Gabby sent some in, and Chris, who's going to be joining us a little bit later, he's out fighting cybercrime right now with his superhero suit. So, you know, everybody kind of submitted some. So be sure to check those out. Those links are really valuable.
It's cool. Yeah. You know, Chris, he was in talking to us earlier, and then all of a sudden there was kind of a big sign up there in the sky, you know, and then he had to kind of rush out there, you know, kind of like Batman to go and do that. So he'll be back in shortly. So, you know, let me give a shout out, folks, to the CompTIA team. They're in the chat room and they're helping field questions. In other words, come up with some questions, with some questions for Gabby and later on Chris. And we're excited to hear from you. So feel free to ask questions in the chat. We can't hear you, but we can definitely see what you type in the chat. So type in some interesting stuff, and so that we can answer your questions. While you're doing that, to celebrate all of the cyber experts out there keeping us safe, we're giving away a bunch of stuff, exam prep bundles. And if you haven't yet entered our bundle giveaway, that's what we're calling it, you've still got time. to enter. We're going to announce one winner at the end of this stream, and more winners at the end of next week's YouTube live. So head to the blog post description and enter that. So there's the, we also have something going on that's pretty cool. It's a fantastic offer for everyone watching right now to celebrate Cybersecurity Month and help more people become cyber experts. We're announcing CompTIA Cybersecurity Month flash sale, and that's officially on right now, the flash sale. Save 20% on exam vouchers, learning products, all the bundles with the coupon code. And here it is, CybersecOct20. That's CybersecOct20. Okay. So there is the code there listed there. Did I say that right, Don? I think I said it right.
I think you did. It's a really cool code.
It
sounds like a
good
super
one.
villain.
Okay, so the code again is CybersecOct20, okay, because it's October, right? Act soon, and this is a very limited offer, folks, okay? It expires tomorrow night, okay, Friday night, for at least my Friday
Would
night.
you say offer expires while you wait?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Operators are standing by?
That they're standing by, all that. Thanks, Don. I like that. So head on over to CompTIA store today and get started with that. Now, Don, you got a fantastic offer as well from IT Pro.
Sure.
TV.
Yep, it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and we want to make sure that everybody is aware and learning the skills they need to be successful. So at IT Pro TV, we are doing a 30% off promotion for all personal plans, and that's for the lifetime of your subscription. All you have to do is head over to itpro.tv, and when you check out, use the code CompTIA Live. That'll be active all month long, and you can punch that in. You know, I keep saying all month long. There's only like 8 or 9 more days left in the month. So hop on that and jump in to be able to enjoy training on things like Security Plus, CISA Plus, Pen Test Plus, CAS Plus, as well as all the other CompTIA certifications. You'll find them in our library.
Well, thanks, Don. Appreciate it. I didn't mean to step on your IT Pro TV code there. It's just doing that naturally, I guess. Michelle's asking a question, kind of a next week question. So, Michelle, tune in next week for the full answer on that. The answer is November. The 601 exam will begin. Don't worry, 501 folks. It'll still be a long grace period. You can Google Security Plus 501 or 601 Security Plus CompTIA, and you can get all the details up on the website. So there you have it. So why don't we go ahead, Gabby and Don, and let's talk about some of these essential skills. And folks, I just want to remind people, we'll start with technical skills talking about this, but remind people about the links that are available with some pretty cool resources that can help you get hands-on practical learning. Don, Gabby, it's all about hands-on practical learning, isn't it? Don, give me some perspective on that, because there's so much acronyms and all the fancy words and things that we use, but it really comes down to what you know, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And a lot of people watch movies, they watch TV shows, they see Mr. Robot, and they see hacking go on, and then they say, "Wow, I want to get into that career. I want to learn that." But the challenge is, how do you practice, right? How do you practice without breaking the law? You can't just go and randomly try and hack websites, right? You've got to make sure that you're allowed. And so there are a ton of resources that are available out there. There's obviously a lot of training that's available that you can participate in, but the cybersecurity community has really come together and created a number of great labs that you can participate in, where you can run virtual machines on your own network, where you stay on the up and up, you don't get in trouble, you can practice with whatever tools you want and kind of learn how things work. That gives you hands-on experience that's incredibly valuable. Now, Gabby, for you, you're out there in the field, and I'm sure every customer site or whatever that you visit is going to be different. So how do you prepare?
I think it's really important to be reading up on any latest cybersecurity news, because you never know what's changing. For me, I work with government systems, a lot of government infrastructure. So for us, like when we have certain situations where the government is very much focused on, we get different types of threats. And so we really have to keep up with that. So for me, it's my responsibility to be able to keep up with the news. One of the ones that I really like is Info Security Magazine.
Yeah, I like that one too a lot.
Yeah, so definitely subscribe to those, and then you can get those notifications as they come.
And that subscription is free, isn't it, for Info Security? Or do you have at least most of the feeds and things are free?
Yeah, a lot of just the news is free. So
yeah. I find that a good one. Also, like gosh, there's so many good ones out there. Even stuff as broad as ZDNet, or I'm a UK Register person. I like that stuff. Don, how about you?
I actually have this news reader that I use called NewsBlur, where I put in, I easily have 80 different sites that are in there, and it lets you put in filters so you can filter out all the junk. And so I get this kind of curated news feed that I read every single day. But as far as the main sites on cybersecurity, the Sophos Naked Security blog is one of the best.
Mm,
You can find, really great information. What I like about them is they don't just tell you about an exploit or a vulnerability. They actually go into the details on how it works and
that's
how you
cool.
can identify it on your network. And understanding how the attacks work is way more valuable than just knowing about the attack, because if you know how it works, you can identify other things that go alongside with that. And we had a question come through in the chat room, which kind of piggybacks off of this. So Tawadros was asking, how do we secure IoT devices we use in our home, or should we totally avoid them?
That's funny.
IoT devices.
I was moving. I had my mouse hovering over that thing. So keep going.
We both saw it.
Yeah.
So it's a great question because every IoT device is different, right? So it's
Yeah.
not like I can say, here's this one set of instructions. If you follow it, you can do it. But if you follow the various news sites and read up on what they're saying, you're going to see these recurring themes. They're going to tell you like, hey, these wireless cameras got breached because they had a default certificate attached to them and you needed to regenerate that certificate, or default user credentials were set, or this firmware update was out. And so that's really how you secure IoT devices, is you need to stay up to date on the configuration around them. They can be made safe.
A lot of them can, as long as they have firmware that can be updated or passwords that can be set. Some of them were developed so quickly, so rapidly, or even wrongly that sometimes they can't, right? But Gabby, what's your perspective on that with IoT devices?
I think it's fine to be able to use them. Like you guys said, updating the firmware. I think
Mhm.
also limiting the services that the IoT devices use. So if
Mhm.
you don't really need to use the location services on it, turn it off. Be able to set them up to fit your needs and also the security needs.
No, it makes perfect sense. One of the things I find interesting about IoT is that Linux is often, at the foundation there in terms of the operating system, right? So if you learn your Linux, also, do you I'm asking the crowd, do you understand the idea of what's in a firmware device? How does the memory work? How does the network stack that's in there work and things like that? So learn the constituent elements of IoT, I think is what I would do. And what's cool about that is it also helps you learn operational technologies. And by operational technologies, right? Don, Gabby, tell me if I got this right. Operational technologies are the technologies that we use to control robots, or the pressure inside of a tank, or a water or whatever inside of a pipe. In other words, cyber physical systems, stuff like that. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we see that with a lot of our infrastructure services right now that are under attack, that, the power grid, any kind of industrial control systems, these are systems that weren't necessarily designed with security in mind, right? Because the idea of a giant cyber threat wasn't there 30 years ago when this equipment was designed, and then it was brought online. You're dragging this equipment kicking and streaming into the online world. So now, if we can't rely on that equipment to be secure, right? Maybe you have an IoT device that's not getting firmware updates, or you've got some proprietary device and you really don't know how it works, right? You have to treat your own devices as untrusted. And I know it sounds weird, but it actually makes sense to have firewalls inside of your network in some scenarios. If I have something as simple as a fish tank that has some IoT pump on it, I might choose to put a firewall in between it and my network so that I can actually control the traffic coming in and out of it. Now, that's overkill for a home, right?
Yeah.
But if you are a nuclear power plant, that makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. And so, you may have a highly segmented network so that you can absolutely control the flow of traffic that moves in between it. Gabby, have you encountered anything like that, especially in like the infrastructure or high sensitivity environments?
A lot of times, a lot of the systems are very, very old. A lot of times what I'm seeing is servers that can no longer be patched because they're using really old servers. So
Mhm.
a lot of times what happens is the best way for them to be able to secure the system is actually to have a closed network, and just not have it connected to the internet, because sometimes there's not enough in the budget to be able to just completely redo all the systems. So they kind of have to figure out other ways to be able to secure it.
Is that kind of what they call with an air gap? There's a fancy phrase where they can basically have systems that are working. They may not be secure like IoT systems or whatever, but they put them way behind in kind of a completely isolated environment. Is that fair
Yeah.
enough to say, Gabby?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that's why I travel a lot for work, because I go to these sites to be able to look at these networks since I can't access them from outside.
All right, so let's talk about some of the skills that you need to actually be we'll say a pen tester or just a threat hunter in general. When I sit down on a system that I have access to, so if I have authorized administrative access to it, I can pull the version of the operating system. I can then pull up all the documentation and look for CVEs. I've got all that information. But let's say I'm going into a network blind. So, Gabby, we just flew you into this location in Atlanta, Georgia, and we need you to take a look at this network. The first step is discovery, right? How do you go about doing discovery? How do you go about finding devices on the network?
So I actually do an Nmap scan. That's one of the things that I do. But a lot of it also includes kind of communication with the actual customer. So I will sit down with them and be like, do you guys have have you guys been doing any testing or brought in a new system or something like that? And sometimes they forget. So when I scan the system or the network, I'll find some of these devices just sitting here and I'll be like, what is this? Like, what's going on here? So having that open line of communication to see like, why are these things here and what are you guys trying to accomplish? And is there a better secure way to do this?
I forget the terminology, and James, you can probably help me here. Is it called black box testing when you go in with like zero information versus like red teaming where you actually have active communication of information? Is that right?
That's right. It's close enough.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely correct. And then I feel like I see a lot of that in my day-to-day is a lot of black box testing. Usually I don't know what's going on. And I try to ask some things ahead of time, but sometimes the customers may be too busy. So they're kind of like, just go on site and just go ahead and start scanning and looking for things. So it definitely is more of a black box testing.
You mentioned Nmap, for example, network scanning and things like that. When it comes to, and this is where people can fall into the trap. Like, yeah, I've used Nmap. And it's like, well, congrats. It might be a script kiddie use of Nmap. In other words, what are some, and I don't want to get into the commands and things like that of Nmap necessarily, right, Gabby? Although, we could do that later. That'd be fun. But what are some of the knowledge that you need in order to use Nmap productively to find the vulnerable resources or whatever, from a TCP perspective or UDP or IP, stuff like that, guys? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think going back to the earlier point about really understanding the protocols, I think that's something really big because you'll be able to scan the networks and then you'll see a bunch of protocols and then you'll be like, well, I don't know if something's clear text or something is secure. So being able to understand that is going to be much better. And then also understanding what the protocols are used for, because sometimes certain systems need to use certain protocols. So if some are missing, that gives you a better idea. Also, when you're looking at the results, you're going to see different IP addresses. Sometimes you'll see the host names, other times you won't. Mm-hmm. It really depends on how the network people have set it up. So having host names is really important because that kind of gives you a better idea to understand if something's a rogue device or just better understanding the entire network there.
Makes sense.
I think it's also important that you have an understanding of the types of devices on the network and how they behave. And an example of that would be like with Nmap in its default, like if you just install Nmap and point it at a network, it does a ping sweep. It pings all the systems on the network. And if it gets a response, then it does an additional scan. But a lot of systems like Windows 10, if you've got it set up as a private network and it has the Windows firewall turned on, it won't respond to pings. Yeah. The machine is there, but it won't respond. And so you have to know that. And you have to tell Nmap, hey, don't just do a ping sweep. I want you to actually go in and do a TCP connection. Try and see these systems. So you have to get a little more advanced with it. And that, I think, is something you learn over time. As you interact with more networks and do discovery, you start to learn the tricks to take a tool like Nmap that works out of the box, but with a little bit of customization, all of a sudden becomes an incredibly powerful tool.
I'm going to anthropomorphize networks. I've always found using Nmap is kind of like talking to people with different accents. Okay. I mean, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but it's the idea that if you're trying to scan a Linux system, it's going to talk on the network according to a protocol, which is like a language, right? Every vendor has to do that. But there are so many different flavors of Linux, and there's Windows. It has to talk on an IP network as well. But each developer, right, has different nuances. And so each of these systems is going to talk differently. And so you have to figure out how to determine what that accent is like. And to Don's point and Gabby's point about how certain systems can block traffic, even the way in which they block traffic, scanners such as Nmap are good enough to where they can determine, okay, I can tell there's something participating on the network and blocking me rather than nothing being there. And if the database is good enough on those scanners, they can tell pretty well what's going, who's talking and who's blocking, or who put the hand up to say no. It's pretty interesting that way.
All right, so Abby, let's continue the story. So you've scanned a network, you've made a list of the nodes that you were able to detect or the resources that are out there. Now we want to step into the next phase of determining our attack surface, right? So figuring out, are these machines vulnerable? Are there exploits we can take advantage of? So what's the type of tool you move to after the Nmap scan?
So the other tool that I use is actually Nessus, which is a vulnerability scanner. And that is a lot of the core work that I do. So I go ahead and scan that, or you use that tool, and then it will generate a report, and then I take a look at that report and I have to break things down, because when it first spits out the information, it's going to be all technical. Like you're not going to be able to communicate that with non-technical staff. So I have to analyze and really understand what's going on in that report.
And that's the less attractive side of IT security, right? People see hacking movies and people doing all sorts of crazy code, but then at the end of the day, somebody's got to write a report on the stuff. There's a good bit of paperwork.
Yeah, no doubt.
Definitely. And yes, there is, the less glamorous side of cybersecurity, but it's so, so important. And I'm always telling that to everybody, because you're really finding the problems that could cause a cyber hack. So if we can go ahead and stop that before it actually happens, that's really the goal. We don't want to see a bunch of hacking happen. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of paperwork, a lot of reporting done, but it's really important because you want to make sure that the customer understands what's going on, because then they won't find either the resources or the budget to really open up to cybersecurity.
Go ahead, Don.
Oh, I was going to say, we're talking about the skills you need to work in cybersecurity, and I think Gabby was just touching on it right there. That there's a decent bit of soft skills that get involved here too. Not just your technical hacking, digging into a network, doing packet inspection or whatever, but taking your findings and turning those into a format that is understandable and useful to the customer, right? And that's arguably a harder skill to learn than some of the technical side of things. Would you guys agree?
I'll just throw this out there. One time I did just a bit of interviewing just to see what people were asking for. And one of the interviews, it was really cool. We just got into great conversation. And she was saying, I can teach a lot of the technical skills. There's great programs out there. She even mentioned CompTIA. I was just like, but she said the things that I can't teach easily, in 6 months, I cannot teach somebody to walk into a room and look someone in the eye, or to make a decision on how to properly write something down, put it in a spreadsheet or whatever. And I'll tell another quick story, and then Gabby, I'll let you talk here. But one time I was talking to somebody. I said, what's the killer skill, or a killer tool of somebody who does a lot of reporting or a lot of work when it comes to finding vulnerabilities? And she goes, PowerPoint slides, Excel spreadsheets, things like that. And I thought that was interesting. It wasn't Nessus, it wasn't Nmap, which are all cool and obviously useful. But Gabby, what are your insights on that?
I was going to say, like, once you grow in the cybersecurity field, you're going to notice that more and more you're going to need communication skills. For example, like myself, like I'm using a lot of communication skills when I'm communicating with government employees and staff. And then I even look at my own manager. I mean, he is very, very technical, but he doesn't really use any of the technical skills anymore because he's in charge of teams and making sure that the teams provide the cybersecurity. And he needs to be able to present to our vice presidents and all that. So having those skills to be able to present and communicate effectively is really important to be able to manage a bunch of teams.
There was a really good question here. That was someone was asking here. Of course, this thing keeps jumping around and I can't find it here, but it's somewhat related to what we're talking about. Are companies actually investing in cybersecurity, or are they more lenient and not accepting the reality of security? Now, it's a little bit different question, but I think it's actually relevant to the idea of trying to explain to organizations or convincing organizations that cybersecurity is important in the first place. So Gabby, I think you find that companies are investing in cybersecurity, correct?
Definitely. I know for my company, they have made cybersecurity a priority, not just for themselves, but because they also work with government systems. They also provide that cybersecurity towards the customers as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we're also trying to create that importance to our customers as well, because a lot of our government customers are still in a different mindset and they may not see cybersecurity as the most important thing. But we're definitely trying to open up that conversation and let them know what is going on.
I know I get frustrated when I see sensationalized headlines, which is what we see a lot in media these days. The top 10 cyber threats. You won't believe what number 3 is, and stuff like that that kind of draw people in. But I will say, and we can all laugh about it because you've seen it. But I will say that it is kind of nice that it's helped a lot of executives to appreciate how much danger there is out there. And even if you ignore the sensationalized headlines, there's the very real stories of company XYZ had a customer database exposed through a improperly secured Amazon S3 bucket or something like that, right? So they were just using cloud storage and didn't secure it properly, and then attackers found it. That kind of thing happens weekly, almost daily. You see the headlines rolling around. And so now I think we've gotten to a point where as an IT worker, you can go to IT management and say, hey, I think we need to spend $10,000 on getting a pen test done this month. And they don't freak out over it. And they say, well, $10,000 preventatively versus the insane amount of cost and the PR hit of actually getting hacked. People are recognizing that. And so that's a change for the better, I think.
I think that conversation goes back to the conversation you had about soft skills. If as long as you can show the value of what you're doing, suddenly that 10K or whatever price tag doesn't seem so large. I think it comes down to finding persuasive ways to talk to folks, rather than kind of running into the server room or into the exec room, with your hair on fire kind of thing. Probably.
And I think that goes back with the whole great communication, being able to explain why this is important and where to invest for cybersecurity. Really great skill to have.
Absolutely.
Yep, and coming up with sentences like people running this operating system have probably already been hacked. Here, right?
Oh, hey, I want to lurch back into some technical stuff. There was some question about various operating systems or flavors of operating systems that people use to practice these skills. And by the way, guys, people, you don't practice it on systems that you don't own. That would be bad. All right. But going back, people have mentioned, I noticed in the chat windows, they've mentioned things like Kali Linux, of course. They've mentioned things like Parrot Linux, if you've heard of Parrot, all that. Gabby, what are your thoughts about these, kind of, ready baked operating systems and or bundles of tools and things like that?
So I actually use a bundle of tools as well when I go on site. So I am for it. So I think it's a great way to, like, if you're able to have that in your own shop and be able to learn from that. It's so important because those types of flavors of Linux is going to be important for you when you're out on the field and doing these types of cybersecurity scans and tests.
Exactly. Over there, Don, how about you? What's your perspective?
So one thing I've found is that built up, packaged together operating systems like Kali Linux and Parrot are great when you're learning, when you just want to quickly be able to jump in and use the tools. But I've found that the bulk of the tools perform better when they're run on the native operating system. That there's certain things that you're not allowed to do with a virtualized network adapter that you can do with a physical network adapter, especially when you're trying to test things like VLAN hopping and things like that. They work so much better on the actual hardware. So I think for learning, virtual machines are great. But if you're going to become a pen tester, a lot of pen testers you'll see will have 2 laptops, right? One laptop, that's the one they're doing their findings reports and other things on. And then a second laptop that is running a stripped down version of Linux and natively running the tools they need with actual hardware access. Now, we don't all have an extra machine laying around, but today you can even use things like Raspberry Pis to do it and have that native access.
I know a lot of guys who bring that in. Back in the day, seriously, live DVDs and even a long time ago, I remember bringing in discs, floppy disks that you threw in there that had stripped down stuff and all that. Here's an interesting question. It's a practical question, and we'll get into that in some more practical stuff here. But Lakpa, I don't think we're going to talk about how to set up a backdoor on someone's machine, and I would hope you would not do that illicitly, illegal, or unethically, etc. But let me kind of flip that question on its head, Gabby. What are some of the indicators, some of the weird things, indicators of compromise? What are some of the weird things that you would see after doing a scan that maybe some sort of backdoor has been opened on someone's machine? And you might even have to describe just in layman's terms, what a backdoor is and how it can behave, Gabby.
Yeah, so a backdoor is pretty much another way for you to enter a machine and be able to almost be like the user and be able to do different things and get data that you're not supposed to. A lot of times backdoors are used for testing purposes, but sometimes people forget to turn them off and then they go into production that way. So for me, what I see is usually what I'm seeing is if something's odd in a scan, usually I have to take a look into it further. I mean, some of the things that I see are like any unusual network activity. So if something's not right, I usually have to go into that. And, sometimes the scan is not going to tell you everything. So sometimes I'm able to go in and search things even further and also communicate with the staff before doing that. But yeah, that's one of the things that I do.
Well, thanks. I think that's, to me, that's precisely the type of thing you look for. Some sort of unusual way in which the system is talking on the network or that application is behaving. Things like fuzzing can help do that. I suppose fuzzing is where you start throwing traffic or throwing data at a particular application and see how it responds to them. But Don, what's your perspective on this about backdoors?
What Gabby was describing is a skill that I think is really valuable to people, which is just anomaly tracking, right? Looking for anything that is different than it should be. So the trick with doing good anomaly tracking, though, is you have to know what the network looks like normally to be able to spot when it's abnormal, right? So if I know that my server normally has 5 ports open on it, but today it's got 6 ports open on it, that's a problem. Wait, where's the 6th port coming from? What's going on? And when you're logged into a server, you have various tools like the SS or Socket Statistics tool or Netstat that will show you all the open ports, all the open connections. But even outside of the server, you can do things like packet captures and protocol analyzers, things like Wireshark is a really popular one where you can view traffic on the network. And if you know what the normal traffic looks like, you can spot the unusual traffic, and you can see when people are exfiltrating data. So for people who aren't familiar with that term, a lot of us, when we think about hackers, we think about stopping hackers on the way in, but hackers are really smart. and we have to stop 100% of the attacks. They just have to get one of their attacks to work. And so sometimes it's easier to spot them as they try and get the data out. So they've gotten into the network somehow, and now they start downloading data or whatever. You should be able to recognize that and see increased bandwidth or traffic flowing on ports that it would normally flow on. And there are companies that make an entire business out of selling appliances that analyze your network and monitor traffic patterns and flag that. But even a human being can do it. If you know what a normal traffic pattern is, you can spot the abnormal.
In a big way. A quick story I can throw out there. One time it was an application. It was developed using something called Nginx. It's a type of web server. It's called Nginx. You can look at it. What is it? Nginx. You can Google that, right? And so I was taking a look at it, and then I noticed that a system that supposedly had this custom application running. I went there and looked at it, and the server part of it said Apache server, and I'm like, Nginx is not Apache server. That's two different development projects. Okay. And that's when I realized somebody had been messing around, and it turned out to be this backdoor that somebody had opened up. It did a good job imitating, but the hacker had gone in and instead of using Nginx, which probably would have fooled me, used something as obvious as a different type of web server. So I got lucky that way. So to your point, Gabby and Don, about comparing baseline, to actual explanation. So it's pretty cool to see that. There's a question here talking about DDoS attacks, distributed denial of service attacks. Let me just ask a basic question, Gabby. When you are out there looking for things, do you come across either evidence or issues, configuration issues that are ripe for DDoS attacks? Because they seem to be a problem out there. You hear about it in the media. I hear about it in talking to subject matter experts. But what kinds of things are you hearing about distributed denial of service attacks?
So it's a little bit different for me just because a lot of these networks are going to be closed. So for me, usually what I'm running into are like devices that are not supposed to be on the network, but they're physical devices that are in these sites, which have already been locked down. So far, the devices that I have found connected were used for testing purposes, not because somebody was trying to take out data or trying to send people to other places. So that's pretty much what I've seen there.
Okay. One of the things I've noticed, Don, has to do with network segmentation, but go ahead. What are some advice that you've seen, some things that you've seen about DDoS?
Sure. So with denial of service attacks, the trick with them is you can't stop them once they've already made it to your network, right? You can filter the traffic, but at that point, they're already consuming your bandwidth. So you've really got to find a way to stop them before they get to your network. And that means either working with your ISP or possibly leveraging a service. Cloudflare is a company a lot of people hear about. Services like Securi, hosted web application firewalls. These are networks that will sit in between you and the internet user. And then if a denial of service attack happens, it gets stopped out there, that other kind of edge of your network, before it comes down to yours. And that's really how it has to be done, that you can have the state-of-the-art data center, but if the denial of service is already sending that traffic, that giant flood of traffic is coming down to your building, they've already won. They've already consumed all the bandwidth on that line if it's a volumetric attack. And so volumetric is where they're just throwing as much data as possible. There are other denial of service attacks, though, where they're like maliciously sending malformed packets to run your server out of memory. And those are ones that you can protect from on premises. And web application firewalls are a great tool to be able to help with that.
That's what I found. A lot of people will say, well, you drop ping, right, Gabby? You drop ICMP and things. And that's, to me, kind of the lowest common denominator. What Don's talking about, of course, is a more sophisticated understanding of how you can take layers of a network, as it comes from the attacker all the way to you can take layers and kind of create barriers, as it were. I think that's one interesting thing. So yes, you can drop ICMP packets. You can also, from a attackee's perspective, or at least a participant's perspective. This is the funny thing about DDoS is that Don could fall victim, right, to a DDoS attack, but that's because Gabby and my systems have not been configured properly, or have simply just been manipulated into sending traffic. There we go, sending traffic to Don's way. So I think configuration of systems, that's why what Gabby does is so important, is that she looks for misconfigured systems and issues, things like that. On a personal note, let's see. A lot of people are wondering, Don, what you've got going. Now, those aren't books back there, right? The OS2, that's not a book, is it?
No, that's all my old software. I've got my old versions of Red Hat back there, OS2, Microsoft Bob. Yeah.
Good old Microsoft Bob. Do you have the paperclip? Do you have the Clippy?
Yep, that's where Clippy came from, the origin of Clippy.
All right, enough of that. Let me ask another question. Talk about defense in depth. These days, a little more controversial topic, an interesting idea. Defense in depth. Let's talk about that, and then we'll go on and talk about some hands-on skills and things that we're gonna that people need to learn and how they can get hands-on with things. Let's define defense in depth. Don, you want to define defense in depth? I think, Gabby.
So you never just want to have one barrier between your network and the enemy, because if the enemy gets past that one barrier, now you're in trouble. So you want to have more than one barrier. And if you think about like a home security system, right, you might have a locked door on the outside. That's one level. And then on the inside, you might have motion detection. That's a second level. And then you might have cameras, which are a deterrent, not a prevention. And that's a third level. So you provide defense at more than one level. On a network, you might have a firewall between you and the internet. And then you might have a host-based intrusion prevention system, some kind of software firewall running on your own endpoints. So multiple levels. So if one fails, another kicks in and takes over. Now, James mentioned it's controversial. Some people have been speaking out against it lately, but I think it's really important. Gabby, you probably have a unique perspective on this, because even on a closed network, that doesn't mean you're completely safe, right? You still need security on the network.
Yes, that's correct. And, it's not just network security that you have to look at. Like you said, fences is another thing that I look for, cameras, all that. So yeah, when I usually go on site, I'm looking at physical security, administrative controls as well, and also the technical. So yeah, when I'm doing my reports, I'm making sure that everything's being covered, because if something does fail, then we have a backup to that.
Yeah, the physical security side is something that a lot of people will forget about, and the importance from whether it be deterrent, dogs or whatever, or guards, or how high are the light poles in a parking lot. Seriously, how well do they allow cameras to see people who might be coming in to attack people or systems, for that matter.
Exactly, because I'm not just looking at, oh, you have a fence, okay, that's fine. I actually have to make sure that the certain height meets our requirements. If there's any erosion, a lot of times people think that it's just people who are intruders, but sometimes these sites are located in the middle of nowhere where there's a bunch of deer, and we've had issues where even deer have destroyed some of the sites. So we really have to think about all the attacks that are going on.
I love it, where the deer and the antelope play, huh? So you got to worry about all of these things. That makes a lot of sense, actually, because I have seen instances where you call it wildlife or whatever, caused a problem having to do with communication lines. People eat, I shouldn't say people, sorry, animals eating through communication lines or causing problems that way. So
definitely. Yeah. And then the other thing is, going on that point, a lot of these sites, even the inside, sometimes rodents get in and then they start chewing wires. So I have to see if the wires are high enough, and all that kind of thing. So it's great to see all of that. But yeah, you have to think about everything.
One time sorry, go ahead, Don.
I was going to say, building on this, it is one of the founding principles really of IT security is the CIA triad, right? That we have to do confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? Confidentiality, people think encryption, that obviously makes sense. Cybersecurity. Integrity, we think of hashing algorithms and other things to make sure our data doesn't get tampered with. That makes sense. But availability, right? Denial of service attacks can make your service not available. All right, that's cybersecurity. But if the air conditioner goes out to your data center and the heat builds up and your servers start doing a thermal shutdown, that's the same as a denial of service. And so it might seem weird, but if you get into IT security, the air conditioning maintenance schedule falls under your realm. That's something you need to be aware of. When's the last time the belts were changed out in your chiller units? You need to know that.
Yeah,
Good.
I was once as I was doing an audit, I was once handed like a hard hat. And I'm like, hard hat? He says, James, you got the encryption stuff down, authentication, you're a guru. Come on in here. I'm going to show you the HVAC system because that's a major part of security. So that's a heads up for me. You're bringing up an old movie, very old movie, 1992, I think. It's called Sneakers. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? It's a Robert Redford movie. Gabby, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
There's in that movie, they manipulated the HVAC system, the air conditioning system, to raise the temperature in a room so that the body motion sensors couldn't, sense a 98-degree body, right? Just that's really out there in science fiction and all that stuff. But it is a point that all of these physical and cyber systems are definitely interrelated. Now I'm going to ask a total weird tangent here before we get on to the real topics at hand, talking about getting hands-on skills. What movies, if you had to introduce people to cybersecurity, right? What movie would you ask them, or even scene from a movie, would you ask them to understand and kind of, figure out? Any ideas, Gabby? Any ideas, Don? I got a few.
So it's a tough one because hacking scenes in movies are normally so bad.
It's so bad.
But, I will say,
that they don't get it right.
And people don't think this is a hacking movie, but have you seen The Matrix 2, the second Matrix movie?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's not the greatest, absolutely not. But at the very beginning, Trinity is hacking into a power plant, and she does a Unix shell exploit. And they actually did their research on that. And they said this movie is set roughly around 1994. And so they found an exploit that worked in 1990. And so what she's doing is a real shell exploit that you were able to do. And so, they kept it honest.
No, it's a good one. I think, for example, Gabby, what, any scenes or any movies or TV shows that kind of work for you?
Well, I was going to say Mr. Robot because I know they do a lot of walkthrough and stuff. But ones to stay away from are Hackers and Snowden movie, because I feel like they made it like very Hollywood, and that's that's not like every single day.
Swordfish. That was the best.
What was that?
Swordfish. Do you remember that one? Oh, it was terrible.
So I like Sneakers, even though it's all Hollywoodized. But if you went through and categorized each of those, there's brute force in there. There's all sorts of fun little attacks. Another one is another Robert Redford movie. Has nothing to do with computers. It's called The Sting. If you want to learn about social engineering and things like that, it's an old 70s movie called The Sting. Pretty good stuff. So just throwing that out there. People have got Prison Break out there, maybe, right? There's also Cypher.
Yeah. We haven't mentioned War Games. That's the classic, right?
Classic. Yeah. Which they even talk about backdoors in there. Like we were talking about, they even mentioned that. Okay. Well, let's get into something. Let's see. We've got Chris here, I think. Chris, how you doing?
Hey.
How's it going? Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. I like to show up fashionably late, but this is kind of ridiculous. I hope the conversation's been outstanding so far, but glad I could make it.
It's good to be here. Yeah, well, Chris, we're going to put you on the spot just for showing up a little late. We're talking about movies, either really bad ones that show silly hacking or whatever, or movies that actually show some good stuff. And we've mentioned things like, at least from my perspective, Sneakers worked pretty well. It's an old 90s movie. We talked about Hackers, a movie that probably didn't work so well. Put you on the spot. Can you think of any TV shows or movies that worked? We mentioned what is it called, Mr. Robot.
And Chris, but before you get too far, take just a second and introduce yourself to everybody, since you missed our introductions earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Chris Cochran, currently the Director of Security Engineering at a company called Marqeta. It's a financial technology startup. But at night, I am the host of the Hacker Valley Studio podcast. And so we cover the human element of cybersecurity programs and technology. So that's definitely my passion project.
Fantastic. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the reminder, Don. So everybody, Chris, he's somebody like Gabby, who's just somebody who's just full of information and somebody that you want to network with and follow and learn from. So Chris, what kind of movies here? We have somebody who here was mentioned, for example, Independence Day. I gave it a call.
Right.
So got any thoughts about that? And then we'll get into some ways that we can all practice give some ideas about people how to practice their cybersecurity skills.
So, I would have to go. My favorite movie of all time is The Matrix. And there's definitely a hacking component, but there's a part about The Matrix that I think even expands beyond cybersecurity, but it definitely is relevant. And that's the moniker of there is no spoon. Like, I feel like sometimes we get caught in this mindset. We get caught in this frame of mind. Sometimes we're, inundated with alerts and things like that. And so we get really tunnel visioned on, what is exciting, what excited you about cybersecurity. But once you realize that everything has rules, you can bend, you can break. I mean, that hacker mentality. Once you realize there is no spoon, then you get creative and you start to change how you think about problems. You think about how you can learn, right? You can jack yourself into that machine and learn Kung Fu. Like, there's so many different aspects for cybersecurity practitioners that I think you can get from that movie.
Oh, thanks, man. Very cool stuff. Let's talk, folks, about what it means to get hands-on learning. And I'll give another little caveat here. By hands-on learning, I don't mean hacking into other people's systems and then calling that learning. That's called breaking the law. What's this old saying I like to say, there's a difference between licensed auditing, which is what Gabby does, which is what Chris does, licensed pen testing, allowed, a written contract, right? There's a difference between that and just going out and scanning, breaking into other people's systems, and that's jail time. That would be the difference. Okay. Or losing your job. So with that caveat, what are some ways that you found, Chris and Gabby, and I'll pick on you first, Gabby, some hands-on ways, because it's more than just knowledge, right? Academic knowledge is fine, but it doesn't really do the trick unless you can really do this. What are some hands-on ways that make it so that you can actually do this stuff rather than just know it?
So one of the resources that's actually down below that I recommend is Try Hack Me. That's like a great way to really understand. It's got like various activities and it'll walk you through, and it's got like its own virtual machine and you can play around, and it mirrors the real world. Definitely like the stuff that I do, it follows through with that. And then one other thing, I think it's really important to understand like the business side of cybersecurity too. And one of the other tools that I recommend is the Trend Micro, which is like down below as well. It actually walks you through as being the decision maker, where you budget, where you figure out what's the best solution for your company, and a bunch of different activities come up, and you kind of have to like make those decisions. So that's really cool and very interactive too.
Thank you very much. And those, again, are in the description below, folks. If you don't know where they are, to put it in the chat window, and then we'll do a little flash on there like that. Chris, what are some of the cool sites or cool techniques, pieces of software, et cetera, that allow you to get kind of hands-on with this stuff?
I would say, especially if you're trying to do the pen testing or the red side, enter every CTF, capture the flag that you possibly can, because they are setting up a whole domain for you to play with, and you can get to play with different aspects of hacking. Maybe it's cryptography. Maybe you're trying to do some enumeration. There's so many different aspects of that cybersecurity practice that you can use. And even on the blue side, even if you're on the blue side and you're a defender, you can actually use the red side to fuel the blue mentality. You can look at all the things that, I didn't think about it that way. I'm going to try to block that on my network. I'm going to completely try to shut that attack vector down. So definitely take advantage of those, because they're complete open fields for folks to get their hands dirty, and they don't have to do a lot to actually get there and access them.
And there's also opportunities for peer learning there. A lot of people they befriend each other and help each other out. There's also competition elements, but there's also very much a collegial kind of approach that's kind of cool. Don, what are some of the resources that you've seen out there that are kind of hidden?
It's the pandemic right now, but normally I would say conferences, that the B-Side Security conferences, which are usually local conferences put on in a number of major cities, are inexpensive, if not free, and a great way to meet people in the community and talk and learn about things. And they usually have capture the flag competitions that are going on. Right. I highly recommend those, but right now they're not happening. So when we get back to normal, you'll be able to go to things like those. There are the bigger security conferences that are out there. Some of them have just gotten overwhelming and turned into huge commercial enterprises. So that's why I recommend the smaller, more regional type conferences where you can meet people in your area and that are kind of learning the same thing. Also, a number of colleges have started offering excellent cybersecurity programs that you can jump in and learn. It's at a slower pace, right? If you're in a hurry, college is a great long-term goal, not necessarily a short-term goal. And that's where things like certifications and getting hands-on skills become in handy. And I threw a number of links in that are all posted down below for sites like VulnHub, where you can go and download virtual machines that have entire labs built into them where you can start to go through trying to break through. And you can go on YouTube and find, even at IT Pro TV, we have an edutainer named Daniel Lowry. He does some walkthroughs of those machines and how he finds all the flags that are hidden in the machine. And so you can get a chance to kind of learn how other people are doing it.
And grabbing those virtual machines and downloading them is a lot of fun because it's something that a lot of this stuff's pre-baked. It allows you to do it. There's DWVA, vulnerable applications. You can go in and you can install it on your Linux system and practice what it means to go into bad code and understand what's going on there. There's also something called malware, trafficanalysis.net. That's below there as well. You can download packet captures people have taken and analyze those of so many different types of attacks. So that's pretty interesting to look at.
Yeah. And there's some that are tool specific. Like if you want to learn about Metasploit, right? Metasploit is a tool for identifying and doing vulnerability scanning. That there is a virtual machine out there called Metasploitable. And it's a virtual machine they've intentionally built to have all these flaws in it that Metasploit will just eat up. And so it's a great way for you to learn that tool and see how it is without getting in trouble.
That's the key. And there was a question asked earlier, and I'm not going to be able to find it now because we've got some great comments here in the chat window, basically saying, what level of skill, folks, do you need before you can join in on a capture the flag or on an online forum? I've got a couple of ideas, but Chris, what kind of advice would you have for folks about that, just getting started?
So I'll tell you, I think I was out in the Marine Corps at this point, but I was still largely in the intelligence arena. I had very little tactile experience, like I was never a sysadmin, never a DBA. So I'd say this is probably like 13, 14 years ago at this point, but I had no experience whatsoever. I went to my very first conference and they were like, hey, we have a capture the flag on. I had no idea what I was doing. No idea. They were like, hey, can you do this? I'm like, I'll try. And like, I probably slowed the team down terribly. However, I did learn how capture the flag was run. I met some new people that I could ping ideas off of, figure out what I could do better next time. So I would say that, especially with these virtual ones, because ones that you're not a part of a team, anyone can do them. You can pick whatever problems you think you can solve, look up some of the solutions that you can probably get to. But I would say if you want to do a capture the flag, no matter where you're at in your career, go ahead and give it a shot.
It's all about stepping up. It's all just, you can get going. And if you have some humility, you'll get taught stuff, right? But if you can step up and just have the courage to do that, you'll find that really cool things will come your way. Gabby, what are perspectives do you have about other tools? Before we've talked about like Wireshark and things like that, but what other things would you recommend to folks getting started?
I think another one would be Juice Shop, which you actually go in and you're able to kind of like try out different things and be able to practice again. And that one's a little bit similar to Try Hack Me, but it's focused on a website itself. So that's a great tool. I think being able to download some of the tools on VirtualBox is really important, because not only are you just working on some tools that other people have created for you to learn, but you can also try those things at home. And just being able to understand and take your time and kind of like dabble in those things, because like you said, a lot of this is you have to jump in and you have to be willing to try. And a lot of this is going to be trial and error, which is fine,
Absolutely. Don, any perspectives on that?
So I'm going to steal one out of the chat room. Mike in the chat room just mentioned, definitely know your OWASP top 10. If you are not familiar with the OWASP top 10, basically it's a publishing they do once a year. I think it's once a year of the top 10 most common web application security vulnerabilities that are out there. And these are common mistakes that application developers make and are what attackers are using to get into systems. And if you know these top 10, then you're kind of set up to be able to identify the bulk of the attacks that are out there. So you need to learn what these vulnerabilities are to be able to look for them and spot them yourselves. And many of them will be ones you've heard of that you're familiar with, things like SQL injection attacks, which are attacks where people take advantage of form fields on a web page. Any web page that accepts data input is potentially susceptible. And there's easy ways to solve it, right? If you do data input validation, if you filter out special characters. But if a developer's in a hurry, if they're just trying to get a feature in place to meet a deadline, they don't necessarily think security first, and they make a mistake and it gets out there. So if you take some time and just learn those top 10, that's a real big way to find some of the main vulnerabilities that are out there.
Well, thanks, Don. Appreciate it. Well, folks, the time is far spent. The hour's over. So just real quick, Chris, Gabby, thank you so much for your time. And of course, Don, for your time on this. So it's been a blast. But we've got, Don, right?
Yep.
A bundle winner to announce. Is that right?
Absolutely. And, let's do this. Actually, have we drawn our winner already? So I was going to ask Gabby to announce the winner, but I don't know who the winner is.
Gabby, have to let you know.
There we go. All right. So, Gabby, you want to go ahead and announce who our winner is?
Yeah. So congratulations to David Bonner. You have won the bundle. Yay.
Hey, fantastic. Congratulations, David. So folks, one of the things that you could do is join our Discord server, right? And you can learn more about hands-on type skills and continue the conversation over there. We have study groups for CompTIA certs, as well as career advice, general security discussions, and other IT discussions. So we want to see you over there. We'd also like to invite you to become a member of our new CompTIA rewards program. Share the CompTIA love and get rewarded. For every friend that you refer to the CompTIA store, you'll get a $25 gift card. So that's pretty cool. Reward members also get advance notice of discounts and promotions and things like that. And Don, we've got also to remind people about the offer that you have over at IT Pro TV.
Sure. Yep, it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and so we want to make sure that people remain aware, and we are helping to do that by offering a 30% off promo code this month for all of our personal plans, and that is for the life of the subscription. All you have to do is head over to itpro.tv and use the promo code CompTIA Live while checking out. That'll be active all month long. Feel free to share it with your friends. And once you're in, we have a lot of great training on things like our CompTIA certifications, especially Security Focus, Security Plus, CISA Plus, Pentest Plus, CAS Plus. I'm going to run out of air. But we also have hands-on things like we mentioned, the Capture the Flags that Daniel has done, and several other skills that we have a OWASP Top 10 training, and it's all right there in the library. Be sure to check it out.
So everyone remember that. Be sure also to take advantage of our Cybersecurity Month flash sale. We talked about it earlier. Here it is again. Save 20% on exam vouchers, learning products, and bundles with the coupon code. Lots of comments in the window about the code. Here it is, CybersecOct20. The code again is CybersecOct20. It's flashing there. Act soon. It's very limited. It will expire tomorrow night. And so head on over to the CompTIA store to get started there. So it's a pretty fantastic deal, isn't it, Don?
All right. Now, as we wrap up, I want to do a great big thank you to everybody out there in the chat room and everybody who's watching. The questions have been just amazing today. So thank you all for doing that. And a extra special thank you for Chris and Gabby. Thank you for joining us. I know you guys are busy, so we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and the viewers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, that's fantastic. And remember, we've got a new one next Thursday. So be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel so you can get into the next video for next week, next Thursday, and hit that bell to be reminded when we've got new content to share for you. So thanks, everyone. Have a great night, Don. Thank you. And everybody, all the best. See you next week.